welcome to the farm kitchen. Today I'm going to make chicken pot pie. It's something I try to make a lot this time of year. I make it a lot in the winter, but I especially like it this time of year because I can get vegetables right from the garden as opposed to using it dried. I will dry whatever vegetables I have left and then we'll have it throughout the winter, but something a little bit nicer about having it fresh. So we'll start now. I always, for the summer chicken pot pie, I do fresh celery, but then you notice I'm not throwing away the celery tops. I will dehydrate those and that will be part of my spice mixture that I'll use for our winter pot pie. So I'll use the celery tops and then some dried sage and dried onions. So almost everything I'm doing today, I will save part of it to put in the dehydrator for pot pie again this winter. So there'll be a lot less work to do this winter. So to make chicken pot pie, you start with cutting up your celery, and then I'll move on to the onions and the carrots. This is what the French call mise en pois. It's having everything here that you would need for what you're cooking. I try to use as much stuff that we grow on the farm as possible. It just tastes better, and there's just a sort of sense of pride in the fact that it came from what we grew ourselves. It's funny to see the little plant that you put in the ground, or the seed that you put in the ground in the spring. Come September, which it is right now, we're having dinner. It's wonderful. There's something really amazing about that. So I'm not going to probably use all the celery here. We're only making a chicken pot pie for the 4 of us, so I don't need a huge portion. So that's probably enough celery for us right now. I'm going to pick some of my favorite carrots. Normally, it's my rule, I don't pick carrots before November. And you can see why. These aren't the beautiful orange that they will be given a couple more months' time, but I wanted to stick some in this pot pie, so you do what you gotta do. So I'm gonna put just some carrots. I have a couple turnips in there I'll throw in too. Add a little sweetness to the pile. And there's a turnip. I don't tend to peel my carrots. I wash them, but I like to have all those vitamins and nutrients in there, so I tend not to peel. So we're gonna chop up that parsnip and put that in. And that's probably just about enough of that too. Maybe one more carrot. More carrot than parsnip ratio in there. There we go, just get that chopped. Doesn't have to be anything too small or too big, just in the farm kitchen, anything goes. Just kind of throw it in there. Now for our onion, I tend to like the sweet Vidalia type of onions. You can do whatever kind you like them. Wherever I can stick a little sweetness in there, I do. So for that, I'm also just going to coarsely chop. And the rest I will end up dehydrating for our winter seasoning mix. That's probably just about enough. Maybe I'll take a little bit more. Maybe just a little more. Can you tell I don't really like to follow recipes? I just kind of throw in what I think it needs. I'm working on our cookbook right now, and it was so hard for me to actually sit down and see what amounts I actually use of things, because as you can see from watching me cook, that doesn't happen very often. I usually just kind of, except for my baking, you'll see when I get to the pie crust, that is very, very particular. So I'm just gonna grab some butter from the fridge. Don't look at how messy my fridge is. And then we're just going to cut that, and we're gonna saute these veggies up. Someday I would love to have a cow so that I can say, so I can say that everything we have and everything we make, if you want to come with me, Jacob, everything we make comes right here from the farm. That would be a wonderful thing, wouldn't it? Have it be 100% from the farm. What do you think, Jacob? Would that be great? Mm-hmm. All right, so we're just gonna get this all cooked down. It's gonna take a few minutes. And while that's starting, we'll come back over here and cut up our chicken. because we're just making a small pot pie and because I'm going to use these vegetables for something else, let me move those out of the way because you don't want your raw chicken fat to get on there because then I wouldn't be able to use them. So I'm just going to get this chicken ready. I want big chunks. I use chicken breast here, but thigh works just as well. Actually, in my opinion, it works a little better. I like chicken thigh. It's a little more moist, a little more flavor, but breast is what we have, so that's what we're doing. And the farmer likes chicken breast over thigh, so on occasion I like to appease him. So we're just gonna cut. Big chunks. Just put that all ready. And I'll put this over here. Just wash up my hands. That's starting to sizzle. I'm gonna let that cook in. Get all those veggies nice and, oh, I lost one. Lost the carrot. Scoopy will get that. We have a little border collie who likes it when I lose things. So I'm just gonna let that cook a bit. You could use a different type of fat here if you want. I've been known to use lard on this before. If you have lard, that would be... Actually, that's something when we have pigs in the past, that's one more way I can make it so that we're having more things come from our farm. We had sheep for a little while. You can't make butter out of sheep milk because it's naturally homogenized, so the cream doesn't separate, so you can't make butter, which was a very sad day when I discovered that. But it makes wonderful cheese, so that made up for my lack of butter. Turn it a little bit. So we're just gonna let this cook down. Now it's important, I'm going to do this video in 2 different parts. You won't feel the part, but I will. It's important that I do this filling way in advance because it needs plenty of time to cool before I make the crust. You wouldn't want to put a hot filling into your pie crust because that would start the cooking process and the pie crust would melt that butter and that would make a really soggy crust. So I want to make sure this has time to be in my fridge and cool. So that's why I'm doing this now. Alright. Oh, lost one yet. Alright, in goes the chicken. Spots, I guess I might didn't get through. So they're just going to cook that. Chicken breast doesn't take very long to cook. That's one benefit of you going with a boneless meat. Now in a little bit, I'm going to put in flour as a thickener. So for those of you who are gluten-free, I apologize that this is not going to work for you. But then again, the pie crust wasn't going to help you either. So, and we do actually have one gluten-free person in our house. You noticed that I had 1.5 chicken breasts because I had to cut out a half a breast for our one person who will not eat this. So you have to make it that in mind for everybody. So no, I'm taking my hand. You're gonna eat this. All right, so just cooking that down. I want to make sure the chicken is fairly well cooked before and then to this I'm going to add the flour as a thickener, as I said before. And then on top of that, my liquids that I put in here will be a homemade chicken stock. And I'll post a video in the future on that, how I make my homemade stock. It really does make a difference to have a nice stock for that. I'm going to get that chicken piece of it. So whenever I have any bones, let's say I cook a whole chicken, then I always save the backbone, put it in the freezer. When I've got a nice amount built up, then I take that and I roast that with some vegetables in a nice roasting pan. When I say vegetables, I mean pretty much what you see here. You've got your onions, your celery, your carrot, maybe a parsnip, maybe a clove of garlic. Put it in the oven to roast, dry roast until it's nice and beautiful, and then I pour boiling water over it. And that just releases all that flavors that might have gotten stuck on the pan, and I might use my fork to help loosen those up. And then I strain that, and that is our stock. So it adds a nice dimension of flavor. And then I put it in containers and put it in the freezer for a time like today when I'll need it. Just a little more. Like I said, this is going to make a small 9-inch pie. So I'll have enough for the 3 of us to have for dinner. Like I said, the 4th will have something different. And then the farmer will have some leftover pie to take for work tomorrow. I always like to try to do that if I can. I like to have a meal where he can take the leftovers and just eat that as lunch for work. It just makes things easier. That way he doesn't have to worry about what he's gonna eat, and I don't have to worry about getting up and making something. So I just put a little flour in there, probably a couple tablespoons to start. I'm just gonna see how that goes. I may add more, we'll see. Like I said, when I did the cookbook, it was very hard to go back and figure out exactly how much I put in, because when I'm cooking, I really don't measure much. It's all a matter of look and feel and taste. Just a little more. But it's important when you do the flour that you let it cook. You don't want to have that raw flour taste. Now see how it's sticking on the bottom there? That's okay, just as long as it doesn't burn, because in a minute I'm going to put the stock in and then the milk. Actually, I use half and half. Why use milk when you can use cream? And that will help release that from the bottom. So I'm not worried that it's sticking to the bottom right now. That's just fine. All right, so now here is my stock I've been thawing. Look how beautiful and golden that is. It's not completely thawed, but enough of it is so don't for what I need. Just pour that in. Let some of that fat get on there. Put this lid on again. I'll use that for my daughter, who will not be having this. She can have a nice chicken soup. So there in goes my half and half. And we're just gonna let this cook for a little bit. I'm gonna spend the time, I have a wooden spoon, I don't wanna scrape, but just kind of rub it along the bottom and let this cream and the stock do its good work of bringing up those tidbits that had gotten stuck on the bottom. That will add the nice flavor. Can you see those beautiful chicken fat butter globules on top? That is where the good stuff is. That's some nice flavor. So we're just gonna let this go for a little bit. I'm just gonna stir. You can hear it kind of, and I can feel the wooden spoon kind of catching up against that flour mixture. We want to make sure that we catch all of that. As soon as I feel that's nice and smooth, I'm gonna go over here and we're gonna cut up our sage. The other seasoning I use in this is celery salt. You could use celery seed and salt, but might as well use celery salt. It's got both of them in it. Some pepper. Yeah, that's about it. So sage, celery salt, and pepper, and that will be our seasonings for this. Now in the winter, I would put my special seasoning, which is simply dried onion, dried celery leaves, and then I will put in the dried sage. So very similar. All right, so that's all's released from the bottom. So I'm gonna turn the heat down just a little bit and let this think about cooking for a minute while I come over here and cut up my sage. I have a few leaves here. Let me grab a new knife. The other one was in my chicken. So, little secret for sage. You take them and you stack them up, and then you roll them. Just like that. And then see how I have all those, you don't want those woody stems on, so I just cut those off. And this, I just cut like this, and this makes beautiful little sage ribbons. And I don't have to worry about any of those woody stems on there. Oh, it smells heaven. I wish you could smell that. It smells like I'm walking through a woods. Just lovely. Oh, nice. There. All right, so I'm just gonna put this right in with my chicken. Those beautiful little ribbons. I'm gonna put in a little bit of that celery salt. Believe it or not, that is that flavor in the chicken pot pie that you can't name. You know it's there and you know if it's missing. But what that is the celery. That celery seed. In fact, I let my celery from last year go to seed. It's a 2-year plant, so it won't seed the first year. You have to let it overwinter, and then the second year goes to seed. I let it go to seed, and I have it all drying downstairs, so I can, one of these days, say that I can make a chicken pot pie, except for the flour and butter, completely from our farm. That would be a lovely thing to say, wouldn't it? Even the celery seed would come from here. So we're just gonna let that cook and stir just until it thickens nicely. And then when it gets nice and cooked, we're gonna stick it in the fridge to cool. Hi, welcome back. For me, it's been a couple hours. For you, it's been about 1 second, but my filling has chilled. I'm now ready to make the crust. This is the crust I use on almost everything. There's a couple exceptions where I make a sweet crust, but for the most part, this is it. So let me go over it with you. I am as crazy and haphazard as I was with the filling. I'm opposite of that with the crust. I'm very meticulous because it's very simple ingredients, but if you mess them up, you mess it up. So I weigh the flour and I check first. It's at 5 1/4 ounces. I want a total of 19 ounces, so I'm gonna go 14 1/4. For those of you who don't have a scale, you can put in 2 cups, but I'm telling you, it does make a difference doing the scale. So I have a little bit more than, so I'm gonna take some of that out until I get right at 14 1/4. All right, that's the amount of flour that I need. There you go, thank you, Jacob. I think they see the amount of flour. All right, next is 1 teaspoon of just regular table salt. And I put that in. This handy tool is called a pastry blender. Let me move this out of the way because we're not gonna use this anymore. And I tend to be a little claustrophobic when I start rolling this stuff out. I just mix that salt in. Next, we're gonna take 2 sticks of cold butter. And it needs to be cold because you want it to stay in individualized pieces. That is how the crust remains flaky. So you try to touch it as minimally as possible because of course our hands are warm and that'll melt the butter and we don't want that. So, get all my paper out. Okay, and now I'm going to, see how I'm hardly touching it with my hands? I try to just have the knife do the work. 2 sticks of butter seems like a lot of butter, and it is, but that's what makes it good. And you are welcome to substitute lard for any amount of this butter. There are times when I do. If I have a lot of lard around, I will do that. You get maybe a flakier crust, not as much flavor as the butter. And actually the crust, this crust doesn't last as long. Like you wouldn't be able to have this pie after maybe like 3 or 4 days, where a lard crust tends to last a bit longer. All right, now I'm gonna use my little tool, and you do this kind of motion of press down and up. Press down and up. And I keep doing that until all that butter gets broken into little pieces. I'm keeping my knife nearby because every once in a while I'll have to scrape down my pastry blender. As you can see, I make a lot of pies. This pastry blender, I'm almost due for a new one. It's well loved. Just keep working it until all that butter is mixed in. All those pieces should be individualized pieces. I'm not making a shortbread. I'm not trying to melt in the butter. I'm trying to have that butter stay intact, just smaller. Some people use 2 large forks for this. Some people use their hands, which obviously I don't recommend since I'm trying to touch it minimally. And some people use a food processor. I have yet to try that. I do have a food processor, but I have yet to trust it with my crust because you'll see this doesn't take that much time and it makes really nice crust. Do you see how all of those little butter chunks are in there? Almost there. That's good. So I'm gonna move some things out of the way here. Next, we use 5 to 6 tablespoons of very cold water. Now, I start with 5 because you can always add more. You can't take it away, and I certainly don't want to add more flour. So I'm going to let this get cold a little bit. One. Now, when my mom used to make it, she used to have a separate little dish where she mixed the water and some of the flour butter mixture first. God bless her, but I don't see how that benefits it at all. So I try to eliminate steps if I can. Now's when I get my hands in there. Now I'm going to mix it all up until it's one big ball. That's the beauty of an all butter crust, is look how yellow it is. It's just beautiful. And this can be used, obvious this is a savory pie. You can use it on a sweet pie, I do. This is what I use for all my fruit pies. And here, it's all come together. That's it. I have one big, beautiful lump of dough. So that is gonna stay there. Let me just clean up my workspace a little bit. And my hands. I'm obviously making a top and a bottom crust. The bottom crust is going to be slightly larger than top. So I'm going to cut my dough ball almost in half, but a little bit more to the one side. This will be my bottom and that'll be my top. Now, I prefer greatly a French rolling pin. It allows me to apply pressure where I want it to be. Where a regular rolling pin, I just don't feel that same sense of control. And I like control. Right, Jacob? Yep. So I take my bottom and I put in a little ball and I dust it lightly in the flour. Turn and turn. I'm gonna move that out of the way. Again, I get a little claustrophobic when it comes to that. I like to have lots of space. Pick it up, the flour, and then I let it roll. By doing this, I tend to, not always, now that I say it, I'll probably mess it up, but it tends to keep it from sticking to your countertop if you keep flipping it over and such like I'm doing. Now it's got a good... And by going back and forth like this, it helps it stay in that round shape that we want our pie to be. There's just something so incredibly satisfying about just the feel of rolling out a nice pie dough. Okay, that's probably about right. So here is my 9-inch pan. To get it in, see how it's not sticking at all? Just fold it in half and you drape it over. And then I unfold it. It's very important when you make a pie to let it settle in. You don't want to ever stretch it. That is why people's pies, the crust shrinks. You don't want that. That comes from stretching it. So notice I'm even kind of pushing it in a little bit. This is to prevent that shrinking from taking place. Let's see. Make sure it fills in all those little bits. All right. Make sure it's all the way around. Okay, so that one's done. I'm just gonna move that out of the way while I roll the top. And then we'll put our filling in. Again, I make it into a little ball. Roll it in the flour and start to roll it out. And flip it back and forth. You can see it's starting to stick right there. So let me try just a little more flour. Again, we were very careful in our measuring of the flour beforehand, so we don't want to ruin that now by putting a ton of flour in it in the rolling process. So I'm not going to do that. Just enough to make a cover for my pie. But do you see how I'm moving my hands back and forth like that? That's why I love the French rolling pin. You just get all that control that you would not get with one that has the handle. So just completely different experience. So I'll make sure I have enough to cover it. All right, that's that. Let me grab a spoon and a large fork, and I can spoon in my filling. All right, so here it is, nice and cold. Again, you wouldn't want to put a hot filling in this, it would start to melt the butter. I certainly didn't want that. So there's the filling we made before. Nice and thick. I'm just gonna spread that all out. Okay. Now I'm gonna put my top on. Again, I fold it in half. And then I gently place it over top and unfold. Now, I happen to really like the flavor of my crust. Some people don't like a ton of crust. I say the more the crust, although this is a bit much over here. I might rip off a little bit. I like it, so I tend to just fold it all in. I like to have a big piece of crust that I can dip in the gravy. So I'm gonna do that. Again, this is a little bit much. And one thing my daughter Hannah came up with for that extra crust, because she takes after her mama. She doesn't like to waste stuff. She takes that and she dredges it in, brushes a little bit of butter and then dredges it in cinnamon sugar and then bakes it alongside the pie, and it is just a nice little treat. It's delicious. All right, so now, see, I'm tucking it all. All right, now it's where I make this my own. I tend to use a big serving fork and I crimp it. I like a crimped edge. I think it has a nice country feel. Now, if this were a sweet pie, well, first you need the liquid in here is going to get very hot. Hot liquid creates steam. So if I don't put some holes in this, it's going to blow the lid right off. So if you ever have a lid separate from your pie, what you've done is you haven't poked enough holes in it. So I always poke holes in mine to release some of that steam, but also to let me know what kind of pie it is. So here is a C for chicken pie. Now, if this was a sweet pie, you would see me have some cream in my hands. I would dab it on top and I'd sprinkle some nice rough sugar on there. This is not a sweet pie. This is a savory pie. So into the oven it goes. I did forget to preheat it, but I'm going to heat it now to 425. And it goes, and we'll check on it in about 45 minutes. We'll see you then. All right, let me check and see. I think it's done. Sure enough, it is. You can tell because it doesn't look like dough anymore. You can see those nice flaky layers. It could go for another 5 to 10 minutes and then it would be nice and golden, but we don't have time. We have plans tonight, so we need to get eating dinner. And I hope you're eating dinner tonight with your family too. You take care.